Not as much horror in this one, but still players being shocked by their own actions having consequences. More comical than anything else. I was running a Savage Worlds homebrew and one of my players didn't get along with an NPC they were working with. The NPC didn't have much of a sense of humor and made it clear from the start that they were only helping the group because they had to and didn't care for them. Well, one of my players took to constantly taunting the guy, making jokes at his expense, and in general going out of his way to say and do things to aggravate him. As a DM, I don't care. We are all friends, and I'm not personally invested in this NPC, and it was kind of funny. But I made sure to make it clear that the NPC disliked them more and more. It came to a head eventually, and the key words from my player's character were, "Shoot me, I dare you."
Hey, old man, give me everything.
Call an ambulance! Call an ambulance! But not for me!
Anyway, I started glass.
So you can imagine my player's total shock when he did just that. Player went silent for a minute. He really just shot me? Yes. Why? 'Cause he hates you and you dared him to? Yeah, but I didn't think he would. Well, he did. The player ended up playing it off well and smoothed things out with the NPC, though they were never friends. This is just kind of funny. There's a reason why the phrase, "don't poke the bear" is the saying. Guys, NPCs have stat blocks. They can attack you, and sometimes they will shoot you. You know the meme of, "they will remember this"? Yeah, that's a thing that does actually happen in these games. I'm not saying you can't be jerks to NPCs, because sometimes that can be really fun depending on the NPC and DM. But you never know when an NPC will shank ya. Hey guys and gals, and those in between, Sweeps here, and we're here for more stories. Enjoy! Throwaway account. Compared to other stories, this is probs not much of a horror story, and I'm more just on the need to write and post this to vent, especially since it's still fresh. So sorry if I'm rambling and all over the place. We have a cleric who's been playing really well and balanced as our support and healer, and can pack a punch when needed to be for our offense. Apparently he got into an online argument about the cleric class on Facebook. I don't know where he went for the argument, but he was ranting about it to us on our Discord channel. To sum it up, apparently he was pissed at some people who were arguing about a post on clerics being more than just healers. We chatted about it and basically agreed with Cleric that he really can do nifty damage, and even did an OTK on a horde of zombies with his Destroy Undead. We told him to ignore these people. He's an awesome cleric, and just continue doing him. That is most likely would have been the trigger as to why he started playing more offensively and healed/casted buff spells less frequently. And I get it, I also played Cleric before and they can deal major damage when they decide to be on the offense. Thing is, the Cleric class, at least how our Cleric plays him in combat, isn't built to focus on dealing as much damage as possible, but to be a balance between support, healing, and damage. The few combats in the first session we had after he vented at Discord, although our group's combat dynamics became kinda off, we weren't really bothered by it, and it just kinda rolled with it. Roleplay-wise, Wizard just lightly pointed out by commenting along the lines of, "Feeling a bit on the violent side today, eh?" When Cleric cheered hard every time he managed to kill any enemies. Our initial nonchalance might be because the enemies we faced were not high threat levels, as that session was more focused on investigation and rallying allies. His behavior, however, also started becoming unpleasant at times. He developed a sort of one-sided rivalry with our fighter. FYI, I also play a fighter, but of a different subclass though, who was our main melee damage dealer, and the wizard whose attack spells focused on AoE in combat. He was noticeably projecting the people who argued with him onto us, especially with comments like, "Yeah, now you need the cleric to solve your problems, eh?" Or, "Damn good luck, guys. I hope you don't die when the cleric's not with you to keep you alive." When our parties separated, like, bro, none of us ever invalidated your cleric, like, ever. What point are you trying to prove to us? Me, personally, I got pretty pissed when at once he flaunted how much more damage he did than my fighter. And my response was like, yeah, duh, because unlike our other fighter, I built mine to be a tank and combat support. You know, so he can be the shield and divert attacks away from you guys. Which he just brushed off. The DM has already berated him on it by pointing out that we're not the people that argued or invalidated his cleric class on Facebook. He doesn't need to prove a point to us because we acknowledge his essential role as a cleric, and to stop taking out his frustrations on us and our characters. We echoed our DM's sentiments, and he stopped his comments. Thankfully. But then shit started to go downhill super fast when he faced off against one of the villains and her servants. Strategy-wise, villain focused more on giving us curses and debuffs, while her minions dealt the damage and prevented us from getting to her. Some of us were poisoned, blinded for several turns, frightened to name some. It was a frustrating fight, but can even be more frustrating that the cleric refused to cast spells that can resolve our conditions or heal anyone, even himself!
Wow, son, we need to have a word.
Every time it's his turn, he would only cast offensive cleric spells like Guiding Bolt, even using up his higher level spell slots to cast them. Sure, he did damage when his spells hit, but he repeatedly fell unconscious, especially when we thought it would be a wonderful idea to run headlong into the middle of the enemy crowd and be surrounded by them, just so he could cast his spiritual guardians. We collectively groaned when he said, "I'm a cleric. I keep the party alive, and the best way to keep the party alive is by killing those who are trying to kill us first." I apologize for switching accents. When in combat, Bard, who was usually our strategist and the one making it easier for us all to hit and kill things, ended up having be the main healer with her healing words and healing potions, especially every time cleric falls unconscious. The situation turned really dire when it's just the Bard still standing, cursed with a 1d8 damage every turn, and outnumbered 3-1. One of the minions wasn't even damaged yet. Cleric's player went off on her, telling her to heal him back awake. Desperate in thinking that he would cast Mass Healing Word to get us all back on our feet, she did so. And you know what the cleric decided to do? He used his main action for an offensive cantrip. I forget the name, but basically those within his melee range get attacked. Then his bonus action was to cast Spiritual Weapon at a higher level. Both spells
miss.
What's even better, Villain uses her turn to attack him. With just the Bard's 5 HP of healing he was obviously taken out. Again. We were close to a TPK, and even the DM sounded visibly distressed at how the battle was turning out. The Bard managed to survive another enemy round, and she was close to be taken out as well, but somehow managed to survive the minion's turn, and the villain's turn, and succeed her save to end her curse. When it was her turn again, Cleric's player had the audacity to demand her to heal him back awake again. She ignored him and woke me up instead with her last potion because I was exactly next on the turn order and also had a potion to help another player. Cleric groaned and demeaned her for it. She replied with, "Since she's a character with a strong strategic mind, given what just went down, it was what she would have done." Which has got to be one of the most satisfying, "it's what my character would do" moments I've ever heard. Yeah, I agree with that. I then managed to give the fighter, who I might add was on his last death save, the only potion I had. Use Action Surge to finish off a minion with disadvantage because I was still poisoned, and the commander strike the fighter into attacking the villain who was right next to him and landed a whopping huge nat 20 damage on her. Still not dead though. Wizard's death save came up, and by some digital dice miracle, he also rolled a nat 20, and was revived by 1 HP. Now this is where we all got a bit sidetracked, because this was the first time anyone rolled a nat 20 on a death save. We weren't sure if Wizard was allowed to do anything on the turn he was revived by a nat 20 death save, but regardless, the DM decided to allow one action, and will apply it for any future nat 20 death saves in his game. Anyway, Wizard used the Scorcher spell, forgot the full name, but basically had fire damage in a straight line, at a higher level and killed the villain. We ended that session by dragging the last living minion back to our base. We stuck around longer after that in the voice channel to discuss the session and did a bit of analysis on the combat with some metagaming knowledge. Cleric's player was pissed and complained that he could have finished the fight and had gotten us all out of that situation faster if Bard healed him. DM challenged him on that and asked him what he would have done if Bard had chose to heal him awake again, and he said he would do the exact same thing that he did when he missed the spells. As of now, as how I've laid out how the battle went down, even if he managed to land both spells and took out the villain, they'd still end up wiped out by any two remaining enemies with what's left of their HPs. That was one thing, but then Bard brought up something interesting. Wait, how many spell slots do you even have left? He stalled in a little, answering by saying he'll check his character sheet, and stumbled in his words. Guess what? he only had his cantrips left and several low-level spell slots. His spiritual weapon would have been casted at its lowest level if he pulled through on his plans, which means that even if he landed both spells and both at full damage, he and Bard would have been wiped out by the enemy's turn. This revelation made things awkward in the chat for a moment, so DM directed the conversation to the fighter and Wizard's Nat 20 miracles that happened in the last moment. Fighter also added that he wasn't even sure that he could have won despite his Nat 20, and even revealed that during the combat he PM'd the DM for some way to let him sacrifice his character so the others can survive and escape. I gave a bit of an input question on the encounter's difficulty level, and the cleric chimed in that the encounter was too rough. Surprise! The DM told us that although the encounter was made to be difficult, befitting one of the main villains, it wasn't the most difficult encounter we have faced compared to some other high-level threat encounters we had. He pointed out that we fought harder enemies before with even worse rolls. For some reason we had several snake eye rolls on one of the encounters, lol. Plus we were even at a lower level back then and still managed to beat them. At some point of our discussion, Wizard went frontal with the cleric, asking why he wouldn't heal anyone, even himself. That it wasn't cool to make Bard deplete a lot of her spell slots for healing words, while he kept abandoning us like that when we were dying. Cleric got defensive and argued back that everyone else had a form of healing, self-healing to take care of themselves except for Wizard. But even then, he also had a potion, which is why Cleric assumes that everyone will be fine. He got rebutted on that when we pointed out that everyone, including himself, was knocked out except for Bard, and Fighter was so close in making a new character with his 2 failed death saves. I don't remember what else was argued, but I think it struck a chord in Cleric, who got pretty quiet when Wizard more or less said something like, "If you have now stopped caring about our characters, at the very least you could still try to care about your own character, instead of caring more about proving a point to a bunch of internet strangers you argued with like 3 weeks ago. They're not even here to watch our sessions and see you prove them wrong. Hell, even if they were watching our sessions, you're not exactly proving yourself right either." We echoed Wizard's feelings, and then he just abruptly left the voice channel. Not sure what's going to happen next session, but the DM says he'll discuss things with Cleric after giving him time to cool off. And that's where we are now. I don't know how to end this post. I feel better after regurgitating this in writing form, though. Have a good week, I guess? I mean, this could have been a lot worse, and there's nothing wrong with playing characters in some optimal ways. Hell, one of my favorite characters, Axel the Jackass, was a Dragonborn Ranger who loved to use swords to fight, and was able to do things that rogues could do for some reason. But this isn't being done for the sake of being out there with experimentation, changing things up, or even being a joke. This is for the sake of proving people wrong who aren't there, and probably wouldn't listen to the stories of your cleric kicking ass and taking names anyway. Trust me, I know all too well how once people on forums or social media sites have an opinion, it's nearly impossible to change those opinions, especially if it's done in the name of destruction or dislike. TLDR. DM tells us that not attacking an obvious companion turned werewolf is metagaming and rejects a character for having a face covering. Oh boy, this is gonna be a fun one. This story recounts the questionable decisions involved in 2 campaigns hosted by the same DM. The person of focus is the DM, who we'll call Norbert. Gee, I wonder what the editor's gonna be using for that. Homebrews and hiccups. I had just started playing D&D this year the campaign started, it being my second game. The first oddity was Norbert asking us not to make character backstories, as he decided our characters had amnesia and he'd write our own backstories for us. At the time, we were all new and went along with it. But in retrospect, having no control of our backstories meant we weren't invested in our characters, as we had no say in who they were beyond in-session quirks. Here are some events that I think highlight the nature of this campaign. During one session, we're all camped outside and asleep when we hear a growling noise from the fighter's tent. We walk into his tent and see a werewolf. No bloodstains, and the fighter was not inside. Common sense would say, oh, he's a werewolf, right? Well, Norbert forced us to make an intelligence check to see if we could figure it out, and told us that not attacking would be metagaming, so we reluctantly fight the werewolf. And it starts kneeling and making a begging for life gesture. We protest that it's clear the werewolf means no harm, but Norbert forces us to make another intelligence check, which we fail, and we end up being forced to kill him. Later, Norbert reprimands us for not reviving him because, if you buried him with his sword, it would have revived him in the morning. Singing like it was the most obvious thing in the world.
I'll fucking strangle that little shit.
Okay, now this is something I need to point out. My apologies for interrupting the story already, but we're dealing with some stuff I have an issue with Norbert as a DM. because proclaiming that the characters would do in and of itself is metagaming. Even if it wasn't clear that the fighter was the werewolf, a werewolf is still a person, and the fact that it's giving up shows that it has a semblance of intelligence and was trying to surrender. DMs, you should not force your PCs what to do. You are not the player in control of them. You are the DM. You should allow your players to make these kinds of choices. In addition, I hate how Norbert has so much control over the characters. A player character is something that both the PCs and DM should craft together. And while I can understand the amnesia angle, ultimately, the characters should be allowed to craft their own backstories. In another session, we harvested scales and teeth from a dead dragon. At the next town, I bartered with a blacksmith to enhance my weapon in exchange for several of the dragon teeth. After the deal was done, Norbert immediately mocked me for making a shit deal, because dragon teeth are apparently worth a lot and I could have made the deal with fewer teeth. I would like to reiterate that I've been playing D&D for about 3 months at this point. Okay, I officially hate Norbert. Furbolgs, and face coverings. Next year, Norbert arranges a campaign with the same players. My first character idea was a side species of the furbolg that was more centaur-like, but my character had their backside surgically removed for the backstory reasons. Mechanically, it was a furbolg, but just flavored it differently. Norbert tells me this idea is far-fetched for a fantasy setting, which I understand and move on to another concept. Except later he told the party's druid the actual reason is that I was playing too many animal races and I should try something different. This was the third character idea I've ever had, by the way. My second character idea was a Goliath that's always wearing armor coverings from head to toe to hide his burns that he got from a red dragon. Norbert is honest with me with his problem this time. There's already someone with a face covering in the party. This person was the fighter, a knight wearing a helmet, which apparently was enough for Norbert to reject my whole character. My third character idea for this campaign was accepted, so I guess I didn't share any traits with the party. If there's a moral to the story, it'd be something about being honest with your players. Oh, and common sense is a thing that exists. Well, if there's one thing to say about Norbert, it's that there's a control freak complex that's being said here. There's also this weird mixture of common sense not being used and misused. So, it'd be easy for the players to figure out that burying the sword will resurrect the fighter, with no clues, hints, or nothing to go off on it. But this mysterious werewolf who's in your friend's tent that's perfectly pristine and your friend's missing and the werewolf is begging for his life, better kill him right now! Yeah, this is just a bad DM. In any case, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want more content, and please leave a comment letting me know you reached this end of the video. If you want an example of a comment, try leaving the comment, werewolf. Helps me see how many people get to the end of the video. I'm Sweeps, and have a lovely day.